I think what it's doing is building a bridge and also nearly giving permission, if I can say it that way, for safety professionals to have conversations about this as well. And with your influence and your storytelling ability, I've got to believe that things will change in the future also for safety professionals. So, they're doing a great job caring for other people, but they also need support, don't they? And that's, I guess, what ASSP does too.
The burnout that I was feeling, I did not know I was feeling. I was trying to be Marine Corps Tim, like I'm going to fight through this. I know I'm tired, but I got to still get up at 6 a.m. and be ready for training. I've got to be in Los Angeles in a week, but when I leave Los Angeles, I'm not going home. I got to go to Washington, D.C. So my Marine Corps mentality was just fight through it, muscle up, you're going to be okay, and then eventually you'll get home. And then when I did get home, it was time to pack again.
I am thinking here, inside the room, could be online or face-to-face. We cannot sell what we don't buy. So we need to buy what we are selling. We need to believe, connect with our purpose, because this comes in our voice, in our eyes, and how we can connect with people. So we need to understand this. Today we have a conversation here with Dr. Tom Krause, and Tom Krause explained about how we need to connect with people. We need to be with them and don't lose the opportunity to be with them and connect with the purpose. I think this is really important.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Headline Podcast with me, Dr. Megan Tranter, and my wonderful co-host Andreza Araújo. And this week we are absolutely thrilled to welcome a guest who I think must be one of the most decorated and celebrated safety professionals that I've ever met. We're going to be talking with Tim Page-Bottorff. Tim, I'm butchering your name, I think, but you can tell us in a minute how badly I butchered it. Tim started his career as a US Marine, and he actually served in Operation Desert Storm back in the 90s, earning the Humanitarian Service Medal. He also serves as a Senior Vice President on the ASSP's board. He's received the ASSP's Professional of the Year Award and the National Safety Council's Distinguished Service to Safety Award. He's an author, he's a speaker, he's a funny guy as well. So let's see if we can get a bit of humour out of him. Tim, lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us on Headline Podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. That introduction is great, and you did not butcher my name. Although it's Bottorff, and everyone likes to add the third O of Bottorff, so it's okay. You didn't butcher it. So Bottorff it is, and we'll have a little bit of fun, and I'm looking forward to it.
So let's start. I was reading your CV to understand more about you, because it's good to understand who is coming to the episode and explore. So one thing interesting myself about you participate in the Marine in this Operation Desert. So how this experience shape your view in terms of safety and leadership?
It actually generated the foundation of my view in safety and leadership. And I will tell you that it's given me a great baseline in terms of safety, because I've learned a lot. Now, the Marine Corps used to say to me when I joined that there was no such thing as OSHA. There was no regulatory body there. We don't care. We're going to do whatever we want, and we're going to take whatever risks we want because we're going to combat. But for mission readiness, all the Marines that were out there, they had to follow orders and they had to follow regulations, and like wearing your uniform correctly, wearing certain things at a particular time. And so that taught me a lot in terms of regulation, how to approach things from instead of being kind of a safety cop, I would be more of a safety friend. That developed in the Marine Corps. Another thing that developed in terms of my leadership was in the Marines. I learned that safety wasn't on everybody's radar. It was something that some people did and some people didn't. And I was always consciously thinking about what could get people hurt. I was bringing those things up. And also at the same time, I was making my own personal mistakes and learning through mistakes based, those kinds of things that were going on for me. And I got to say, my baseline for safety actually started in the Marine Corps. I got to put oil fires out when we were in Kuwait. And so learning that regimen from the people that came in to put the fires out, I learned a lot about health and safety there. And so it really did a good job at shaping my view and my focus and my perception on what should be safe and where could we take risk. So what a great question. But it really did a good thing for me in terms of developing my safety style and my leadership in the world of safety.
And risk tolerance, I was thinking about this. I think a risk tolerance is a different approach at this moment, right?
Marines like to take a lot of risk, and most of the time it's because you're trying to win a battle or a war. And I find that a lot of people that are working in industry, they're not really trying to win a battle or a war. They're just trying to survive to go home. And so for risk tolerance, it's one of those ideas that's not really, I don't know, embraced per se. However, when you get that 40-hour vacation notice that you're going to get a couple of days off, you might be a little quicker to leave the lot or quicker to leave the base because you're ready to go out and party. So the risk tolerance goes down. But in regards to most Marines, they understand what true risk is, and they will take the risk if necessary. But again, they try to avoid it because that's when the foundation of forming families, having kids. And so they kind of get an idea personally of what risk tolerance is. And that's a great point that you bring up, but I see it all the time and a lot in the Marine Corps now, since I still do some consulting for them. But for the most part, when you see Marines going out there, they know what risk they should take. And then some of them, they know what risk they shouldn't take. So I like the question. Their risk tolerance is good.
It's so interesting, isn't it? Because I guess we think about the military with these high risk situations they're in, yet there's also a lot of their work which is training and preparing. Are there analogies that, for those who are in civilian life that perhaps they could take from the military with how they're preparing?
Oh yeah. We'll go back to those two words, mission preparedness. And that's kind of how a senior Marine would actually lay out what a safety plan is. Because if a Marine went out over the weekend and got a sunburn on the beach, and then they wouldn't participate on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that's not good mission readiness. Or in other words, you didn't take the safety precautions over the weekend to protect your skin. And so a good analogy would be, are you going to be mission ready? Because the Marine Corps, they show up to the battle first, always and every time. It's before the Army, it's before the Air Force. They're actually doing a lot of special services and recon. And so the Marines are kind of the first to fight. It's always been the motto. And if mission readiness, if you're not prepared for that, and in training is where it really, really happens. If you're not prepared for this specific incident, even though we trained you for it, it has a lot to do with risk and safety. And so to draw a direct comparison, there was a time where over the weekend I was driving from San Diego to Phoenix. You get that 4-day vacation spirit and you're like, I'm going to go have some fun and I'm going to go home. And I did. But there was a car accident that occurred and it prevented me from getting back to the base from the Monday morning stuff that we had to do, like running and PT and practice. And so I could have very easily been reprimanded for that. But you know what? I had a leader that trusted me and knowing that I did make this mistake and unfortunately wasn't able to make the Monday meeting. But imagine that your Monday meeting was combat or you had to go to war and you weren't able to make it with your battalion or squadron. And that means you're just not mission ready. And unfortunately, it was a risk that you took or some safety thing that you didn't follow. And it does have an impact on the business. And as it relates to business, if our people get hurt, then we're not able to conduct our business. And so that's a direct correlation and analogy, and that's a great thing that you picked up on.
What motivates you comes from Marine to pursue a career in health and safety?
I was motivated probably in the last 3 months because the Marine Corps asked me to attend a trainer course for hazardous chemicals, and they wanted me to teach it. Now, back then, I was scared to death to speak in public, and I had to figure out a way. And so I started to train little by little, smaller groups than the larger groups. And in doing that, I found myself in a niche. And I really enjoyed the research, the preparedness, the getting ready to teach a class. Even better, I found challenges in training where people were just not listening to me. And I wanted to figure out a way that I can increase their engagement and their retention in the training. And so then I was motivated in safety because most of the people that came to my class sat in the back row, little engagement, no participation. I really, really hated that. And I took that on as a challenge. And so when I got out of the military, I got a job offer at a semiconductor facility to be in the safety business. And that was the first thing that I said I was going to do. I'm going to find a way that I can increase engagement and retention and training. And that's what motivated me to be in this business, but also because I was doing that training. And out of the ashes of that challenge, I developed the humor and safety. And that was way back a long time ago. And I found that if I was having fun, I can overcome the challenges. And those people, fun, humor was contagious, and they would be on board. So to overcome the challenge that I saw, and that I was motivated by the Marine Corps to do it, it was something that I wanted to do after I got out of the Marine Corps. And I just got lucky and got a job offer in the position that I wanted. And I'm grateful for that. So that's the connection between the military and being in the private industry. And I've been doing it ever since.
Okay, you have to tell us then, how do you bring humor into safety training? Because I think a lot of people think it's super serious and that it's not even appropriate to be bringing humor in. Actually, I was talking to someone about this the other day, and they were reflecting on how they were presenting. Actually, it was at a safety conference, and they were saying that their humor didn't quite land. But clearly you've worked out the secret sauce. How do you actually do it? Because I think a lot of people might want to try it out themselves.
Thank you for this. There's a kind of a plug because I'm going to be doing this presentation at the National Safety Council. And I will be doing it for the rest of 26 and all of the conferences that are going on in that year. But the premise is, if you got folks that are low engagement or that are not participating, and you want to find a way to get them to participate or at least somewhat engage, you have to explore what I refer to the 4 phases of change resistance. In other words, they just really don't want to be there. And so whenever a change initiative comes into the facility, you got to look, is there denial? If you got past the denial stage, is there contemplation? And then thirdly, if you want, you could explore with people together and start a collaboration. And if there is collaboration, and now you've got the 4th stage, and that's commitment. And so I think I go through all 4 of those with individuals specifically. And the way I do it in a training program, or even better in meetings and in written programs, is that I use storytelling. Storytelling to me is the best way to get people involved, because the minute you tell a story about running a red light, there's going to be people that can relate because they probably have run the same red light. And then now it's open doors. Now they can share their story. So that's one way to overcome change. And I got 3 others. The second one is that we're in the world of the internet and AI. You can use memes and reference points, or speak, like I like to use terms, speak in words of music. The presentation, Megan, you saw was Stop, Collaborate, and Listen. That actually came from words from Vanilla Ice back in 1990. So I'll use terminologies in a meme or words from music. The third thing is you might want to consider improv. Now, I know that's tough for a lot of people because they think from a comedian's perspective that they're not able to do any improv. You got to be cautious with this, though, because if you do improv, you have a tendency to point out things or faults in other people. And I'm going to say try to avoid that. But from an improv perspective, you can actually pick up on things right away and use a soft skill to make it relate. Or even better, go back to Maya Angelou. She actually had a quote that said, people will remember some of the things that you did or said, but what people will really remember is how you made them feel. And if you go down that route, it has a great way of engagement. And the fourth thing, the most important, is that self-deprecating humor is the only way to go. You can't pinpoint things in other people and say, haha, you did this thing. Actually, what's better is you could say, haha, I did this thing, and let me tell you that story, which goes all the way back to close the loop to the first thing, and that's storytelling. And you'll always hear in any of my presentations at least one, maybe two stories where I've incorporated something that I did as a mistake. And then I'll ask everybody, did you make the same mistake? Do you have a story to tell? And guess what? You instantly got engagement. So I think those four things will help out if you're trying to incorporate humor into anything that you're doing, especially in the world of safety. But if I could give one more rule, make sure that you're doing humor for the sake of safety, not in spite of safety. That's hugely important to me, because if you're cracking jokes at the expense of safety, you're going to lose all the credibility that you've got spent up right there. So please don't do that. That's a big rule for me. But if you use those four things, I think you'll get an opportunity to at least see an increase engagement and retention.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andrezaaraújo.official, subscribe and hit the bell, so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Can you show us what does it sound like to use humour for the sake of safety, not the other way around? How would that sound?
There's been classes that I've audited as a train the trainer, where I've seen trainers come in and they actually show YouTube videos of people making mistakes, and then they'll use the terminology, the Darwin Awards. I'm not a fan of that. As a matter of fact, I've seen it on LinkedIn where people have actually posted photographs of huge mistakes. And then what they'll do is they'll get a run-on of people just quoting, not good, not good. I can't believe how, and then you start seeing the personal attacks. How stupid are they? And so that is in spite of safety. For the sake of safety would be, this just happened to me. I was driving down the road. I came back from a 10-day trip. Part of that trip was ASSP in Orlando, and I was dead dog tired. And I pulled up to a red light. I was the first one to go. And typically when the light turns green, I'm like, yep, I'm going. Here I am. I'm taking off. But in this case, I saw the car next to me leave, and I was like, oh, I'm running late. They're leaving. I better go. And come to find out, they had a left-hand turning signal, but I still had a red light. And I ran that red light, and I almost hit the van across the street. And when I did, I looked at them. They looked at me. They flipped me off. I flipped them off because, hey, don't they know who I am? And then I finally figured out later on that I ran a red light. And I told my wife that story, and her first question is that, can you read the headlines now? Safety professional gets car accident because they were tired. And I had to live with that. But her next question is could that have been worse? And I had to actually say, yeah, because there were little kids in that minivan that I almost hit. And So for the sake of safety is that you would tell a story, but you're doing it for the sake of safety. So that way you share that story, people can relate. You don't want to do it in spite of safety. If you're pointing things out because of other people's faults, that's the wrong thing to do. So I hope those two types of examples work out for the listeners. But for me, do what you can so that way you're bringing more safety in, not getting rid of safety.
I think it's about recognizing the vulnerability. It's a real safety to real people. And sometimes we forgot this. We go in a training session and it appears perfect. Now, the perfection doesn't exist. So, and I was thinking when you are talking, what kind of orientation? Because, every safety professional face one day a training room. So what kind of preparation, capabilities, because we are high in technical competencies, but technical not is enough. What is your orientation?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I use this as a 4-step pattern too. Number one, I'm going to start off with continuous improvement. If you have the will to continuously improve, you're going to seek feedback, and that's important. And so take that as step number one. Always think, can I improve this thing? The second thing that you want to do is make sure that you prepare. Regardless if you know the information or not, you got to know what you're going to say. And if you've already developed, going back to the old adage of being a professional safety training ninja, and I'm going to quote Regina McMichael here, if you've done the needs assessment and figured out that the class is needed and you've got to deliver that class, you better do the hard work to get prepared. So that's number two. So do the hard work. And number three, the minute that you feel that you've got it figured out, go back to number two. Complacency in training is the worst. And unfortunately, we've got regulatory bodies that require refresher classes. And if a regulatory body requires a refresher class, the OSHA training or the professional that comes in to do the training is going to say right up front, well, OSHA is making us do this. Or this body over here that's regulating this training is going to make us do this. And you might have some international listeners. And if you do, I don't know what other regulatory bodies that are out there, but if there are folks that are forcing you to take a class, it's likely that the person training it's going to say those words. Well, we've got to do this class because this person told us we have to. Actually, in number 4 is go in there for the reasons why you're going in there. That class that you're teaching, it doesn't matter if it's lockout, tagout, or bloodborne pathogens, if it's going to protect a life or if it's going to get that person home to their family, that's the reason why you're there. It's not because the regulatory body told you to be there. It's because, well, I want you to take this stuff and use it. And then that passion, believe it or not, actually does have a chance to increase the engagement. So that's step number 4. Understand why you're really there. Don't go in there and say because you've been told to. You're there for them, and teaching it for them is important. And you'll go back to step number 1. If there's feedback, improve it all the time.
That makes so much sense. When you were describing what some of those trainers were like, I've sat in classes like that. And it makes it just feel yuck yourself that they're nearly apologizing for what they have to what they're training you on. Yet if they showed the passion and the purpose themselves, then you would feel the passion and the purpose also, instead of them apologizing for needing to teach you about something, whether it's a section of a regulation or whatever it is, really.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I've seen that in a lot of trainers. Sorry you guys have to be here, but at least let's just knock this out and we'll try to get out of here early. Well, that's not your real aim, to get out of here early. Actually, you're trying to get them to, use universal precautions to protect themselves against bloodborne pathogens. That's the real reason. And we kind of lose sight of that. And so a majority of the people that are actually forced to do the classes, they didn't want to do it in the first place. And that translates to students. Guess what? They didn't want to be there in the first place. But if you give them a real reason on why they should be there, they actually find a way to participate. Gallup even talks about the happiness quotient. If you're the trainer or the facilitator and you somehow find a way to make them happy in the beginning, which is a big reason why I use humor, you're actually going to get a 70% more effective safety workplace. In other words, they're going to be more likely
Wow.
to participate in safety, and you're going to have a huge decrease in potential mishaps. And that's a big deal for me. And a lot of that starts in meetings and training. And guess who's facilitating a lot of that? We are. And it's up to us. It really is. And I think we could do a better job all the way around.
70%.
Yeah, 70%. You
Just
can
by
ask my
making
good
them
friend.
happy.
Yeah, Rod Wagner did that study with Gallup, and he published that in terms of a happiness quotient, that if you have happy employees, you're going to get a huge return. And it happens to affect the entire business, not just safety. So it's a pretty big deal.
Mm. And you're teaching students at UC San Diego, right? Are they happy?
All right, going back to step number 1 for continuous improvement. They fill out these evaluation forms at the end of a 4-day class. And first thing that I do before I submit any grades is check them out. And I'm happy to report that, yes, a majority of those students are happy. Now, it's a virtual class, so I get comments like more donuts, and I'm okay with that. But majority of the time, what the feedback is that you presented this in a different way. You gave me food for thought. I thought I was just going to sit around for 32 hours, and those comments mean a lot to me because I passionately think that they should engage. So it's up to me to find a way to get them to engage. And I think those reports are helpful. Now, have I gotten feedback that I should try to adjust? And the absolute answer is yes. And so I take that to heart, and it's not like I get dramatic about it and go, oh my God, I sucked today. I need to fix this thing because it might affect a student in the future. And I work all the time to make improvements. And so, yeah. Do they walk away happy? The answer is I believe most of them do. And I get a lot of folks reaching out on LinkedIn. They even text me. I got one today from a gentleman that attended a class from me 4 years ago saying, I remember you did this class. You talked about this thing. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. If they're going to reach out to me, that means I made an impact on something that they're doing in their career. And that's all I could ask for.
I am thinking here, inside a room, could be online or face-to-face. We cannot sell what we don't buy. So we need to buy what we are sell. We need to believe, connect with our purpose, because this comes in our voice, in our eyes, and how we can connect with people. So we need to understand this. Today, we have a conversation here with Dr. Tom Krause, and Tom Krause explained about how we need to connect with people. We need to be with them and don't lose the opportunity to be with them and connect with the purpose. I think this is really important.
You know what, Andreza, you said a couple of things that are important. Number 1, if you're going to sell a product, you got to buy it for yourself. But more importantly, you got to take it out of the box and use it. Don't set it on a shelf.
Yeah.
And when you bring up Dr. Tom Krause, I've learned a lot of what I do in my career from that man alone. And so from a behavior-based safety perspective, making a heart and mind connection is something that is extremely valuable. And we were just talking about training. If you're trying to make an impact, you might be able to reach out to make a connection with the heart and the mind. And whether it's food or whether it's, an internet-based class, it doesn't matter. But if you're not connecting those two things, you won't make a connection with another human, unfortunately. And Dr. Thomas Krause is one of those people that I've learned that from.
And I'm interested here to know, you have a connection with Safe Start. So how this happened?
That's a great question. I've been consulting for them for 20 years.
Wow.
I started in just at the very beginning of 2005. I will occasionally speak on their behalf too. Sometimes they get folks that call me up and say, "Hey, can you do this thing?" And I will always advocate for their business. And I'll tell you why, because we don't do a really good job at internal factors management. And we've gotten a lot of folks nowadays in social media mainly, their marketing is pointing fingers and placing blame as a bad thing. I agree. I don't think we should do a root cause who. I think we should do a root cause what. But at the same time, if we've got an employee that's constantly trying to improve what they do personally, and you do that individual at another individual, you do it by individuals, you'll end up getting a collective later. And as long as somebody's making a personal journey to improve, that's all I could ever ask. And that's what Safe Start's done, is given me an opportunity for me personally to improve. 20 years of 100% of travel, that's a lot for one individual to go through. And I had to sit down and go, what's this doing to me? And I would have never done that had I not been exposed to something like Safe Start. It gives you an opportunity to do a self-assessment, sit down, figure out what's important, your family, things that are going on, and then make changes. I have to give mad kudos to Safe Start for that.
Actually, you've talked about the impact of being on the road for so long and burnout.
I have. And I've had some dramatic moments about it too. The burnout that I was feeling, I did not know I was feeling. I was trying to be Marine Corps Tim, like, I'm going to fight through this. I know I'm tired, but I got to still get up at 6 a.m. and be ready for training. I've got to be in Los Angeles in a week. But when I leave Los Angeles, I'm not going home. I got to go to Washington, D.C. So my Marine Corps mentality was just fight through it, muscle up. You're going to be okay. And then eventually you'll get home. And then when I did get home, it was time to pack again. That was something that just became regular and normal in the house. When I was unpacking, I was doing laundry, and then I was getting ready to pack again. And it got emotional for me because I was like, I got to do something about this. And currently I'm working for Jones Lang LaSalle. And Kristen Egan, who called me up and says, I got this particular job I think you're going to be good at. I didn't realize that I was burnt out in the current position until I started to do that self-assessment. And I was like, I need to do something about this. And I'm having grandkids. I'm going to be doing volunteering more for ASSP. There's things that I've got to do for me personally that I need to make a change. And I made the change. And now I'm traveling around 20% instead of 100%, which is a little bit more manageable. So now when I come home and unpack, I actually get to stay home for a couple of days instead of actually packing up to go out again. But thank you for recognizing that. That was a very difficult time for me to make a decision because I'm very loyal. I love Safe Start for what they've done. I will never, ever speak badly about them. As a matter of fact, if things work out badly for this group, I know that I've got my back covered because they'll always, always, always bring me back. At least I think they would. But those 20 years, it took a toll, and I only felt burnt out after I accepted the new position. And sometimes it's too late for people. And so maybe you should proactively start to think, maybe this is something I need to take a strong look at. Now, do a self-assessment today. Are you burnt out? Is there things going on that you can make changes for? And I think it'll make a huge impact.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andrezaaraújo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Well, it's so interesting, isn't it? Because I'm sure that there are so many people who experience this, and sometimes they're just not sure what to do. They don't feel like they have other options. And it's very courageous, I think, for people to actually more now be coming out and actually talking about burnout and the decisions that they made or didn't made and the impact. And stories like this help other people. And the other thing I think about a lot with safety people as well, yes, there's the burnout from whatever's going on, but then there's also the psychological impact, let's call it, of the work. When you're doing purpose-driven work or values-driven work, and sometimes it's not easy and perhaps you're not feeling the love, let's call it that, you're not feeling the love, then, how do safety people reconcile that and continue and keep going?
Yeah, well, let me just tell you, this road started in your home country. I was invited to speak down in Australia, and when I started the very first day, it was a pre-workshop conference that they had asked me to teach for psychosocial risk. And in the room, believe it or not, Megan, there were 30 people. It was sold out, but all 30 of those people were psychologists by doctorate. And here they're asking me to teach them about psychosocial risks. And I was concerned, nervous, and felt a little out of it wasn't like an imposter syndrome, but I felt a little out of place. But they just didn't have a framework on how to conduct a psychosocial risk assessment. And that's all they were looking for. And so I'm grateful that we had the conversation up front right then. But I was starting to think, I just left Alaska and now I'm in Sydney. I didn't even go home. And somebody was wearing a yellow bracelet. It said, "Are you okay?" And I didn't realize that in Australia, it was a federal law. And it just kind of struck me like people are supposed to ask, "Are you okay?" And we don't do that here in North America. Nowhere. We don't do it anywhere. And so it kind of stuck with me. "Are you okay?" And I started asking, "Are you okay?" And then people would ask me, and I'm like, "Man, I'm tired." I felt like that guy on the Green Mile. "I'm dog tired, boss. I'm dog tired." And I would say it all the time. But guess what? It was always that Marine telling me, just fight through it. You're going to be fine. Just get over yourself. I kept telling myself that. And I'm like, no. And finally, eventually, the Science for Safety Professionals, to your question, that road has been long. And if it takes 3 years to figure out, then that's fine. But the minute that you tell yourself to fight through a specific situation, knowing that you might need rest, give yourself some grace. It's so important, because the minute that you don't, and the minute that you tackle stress and say, just get over it, that's when you might start down a path of no recovery. So recognize it right up front. Total worker health is one of those things that's got me right up front to think about it. ISO 45003, a huge psychosocial risk is ambiguity and the lack of job description. But unfortunately, another one is not being able to speak up. And so if you're fighting through something and you have nobody to talk to, think about who is on your list of support and get some help and talk to them about it. I had a friend, David Silva, who I would talk about these things all the time. Sheila, my wife, we would talk about these things. Am I really just that tired, or am I just being a wimp? And I really just, I don't know, take some time for yourself, do a self-assessment. I can give you a resource if you want. I think from a self-assessment perspective, I have my own checklist. If any of your listeners want that, I'll send it to you. You can have it. But it started in Australia for me, asking, "Are you okay?" to a bunch of psychologists. And I never really thought it would make a direct impact on me, but it has, and it still will. And I'll always think what's good for me now is something that I need to put up front as a preference and not in the back seat as something that I might get to. Being at home was extremely important, and I'm glad I made that change.
And I was thinking about your role that you have with ASSP. For our international listeners, that's the American Society of Safety Professionals. And Tim's currently the SVP, and in a couple of years he'll be president with the way things move along. But Tim, by sharing stories like this, I think what it's doing is building a bridge and also nearly giving permission, if I can say it that way, for safety professionals to have conversations about this as well. And with your influence and your storytelling ability, I've got to believe that things will change in the future also for safety professionals. So, they're doing a great job caring for other people, but they also need support, don't they? And that's, I guess, what ASSP does too.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I'm thankful for you for bringing that up. I will say that ASSP was part of the equation too. And they gave me some frank feedback that I was frankly not even ready for. I attended all the functions when I was on the board earlier. I was a director at large for 3 years. But then the last year, I was traveling so much that there were a couple of meetings that they expected me to be at that I wasn't able to do because of work. And I got feedback from a couple of the board members saying, hey, you're a volunteer, but, you're not showing up to meetings now. And that really stung. Like, well, yeah, but okay, I'm working. I got a job. I'm a volunteer. And I took the route of a victim. Like I should have just said, oh, you know what? You're right. I made this commitment to be on the board. I'm an elected leader and I've got this fiduciary of care and I've got this fiduciary of trust. And if I'm not representing the ASSP board the way it should be, I would hope you would give me that feedback. And that's what I got to. It took me a minute to get there, but that's what I got to. And they were very supportive. So not only just for me, but they're trying to do the same for all the members. And so total worker health, mental well-being is high on the list of things to tackle. Although recently NIOSH, the local research arm of our federal government, has been disbanded in such a way that they're trying to work on bringing that effort of total worker health back. I'm happy to report, though, that we've gotten some federal funding that just got approved by Senate to bring those people back from NIOSH. I'm pretty stoked about that. But with that said, all of the safety professionals that are listening, just for a moment, sit down, look at yourself in the mirror and go, is there something that's out there that's bothering me right now? And is there something I can do about it in both my personal and professional life? And what is that thing? That self-assessment will help you identify. And there is a huge support network. So like your question, ASSP's out there. You've got some friends in your network, whoever is your support team, your family. Don't be afraid to talk about it. It's extremely important. And if you expect people in the workplace from a learning perspective to speak up, do it for yourself as well.
I usually like to talk more about your experience in the field because it's so huge. So 20 years in the field. So what's the biggest mistake leaders make when then try to implement safety programs like well-being, connect mental health? So what is the mistake that you can see and you can share with us?
It actually goes back to your statement before. You said it. If you're going to sell something, you better buy it. But go a little further, and leadership by example is the biggest mistake that I've seen. And so what you've got is leaders will either advocate and then not follow through or do it themselves. But they're telling everybody this is what they need to do. This is what they need to do. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that it's on the list of ISO 45003. You're going to get a couple of things. The biggest one is ambiguity. And the lack of description of a role. And unfortunately, if you've got a fearful workplace, they'll never ask questions. They'll just go down this path of wandering aimlessly. That's number one, ambiguity. The second thing is if that a leader says we're going to do this thing, but they never fully commit, then the communication becomes a trap. And unfortunately, they say, we need to do this thing. We think it's a very important thing. Well, then the supervisors here, we need to do this thing. They never really get the talking points that they need to roll it out effectively. And so communication drops and it becomes, unfortunately, new programs will become a flavor of the month eventually if it doesn't work out. And so to your question, if leaders don't participate and show leadership by example, that's the biggest mistake that I see. The second thing is that it leads to two bigger problems, ambiguity and a lack of proper communication. And if you get the lack of communication, Unfortunately, every program you bring in gets the same treatment. It'll become a flavor of the month every time something new gets brought in. And I think that is a big, big trap for us to get into. So leaders, if you're listening, if you're going to say we're going to do this thing, then you need to do it for yourself.
Tim, switching gears for a minute, do you remember maybe a month, maybe 2 months ago, I messaged you. I was reading the PSJ, and you and I think it was Daniel Hopwood wrote an article there. It was called A New Blueprint for the Future, a conceptual framework for 12 dimensions of safety. I messaged you about it because I read it and I'm like, yes, these guys have nailed it. Like, it was so, so good. But not everyone would have read this. Can you refresh our memory what you and Daniel were talking about and why this topic is so important to safety?
Well, first of all, the new blueprint talks about 12 dimensions, which is a lot to read. So I'll provide the resource or the links to the article. It's free for everybody, so nobody's going to get charged for anything. But the original thought is the building blocks to get to at the very top of this, what was referred to as a house, is to get to these things where people actually show that they have the capabilities or the resources. So to start off, we have this thing out now in safety called Safety Differently, or Human and Organizational Performance. As a matter of fact, that whole conference in April or March that we went to was all kind of centered around that one idea. And what you'll get in the business of leadership is you kind of get a room full of people that come into the room and they just all talk. And then the terminology that you hear back in the 80s was it's the good old boys club. And so when leadership comes out of that room, everybody's all, yeah, we're going to do this thing. Unfortunately, they didn't have anybody in the room that spoke up that talks about something different than what everybody agreed to. So the first building block was differential thinking. Come to the table with a devil's advocate mindset. And if you do, you might be able to disrupt the way people are thinking about what they're currently heading for. So differential thinking was huge, and disruption was the impact. Now, I'm not saying disruption for the sake of conflict, but I'm saying that if you want to achieve some of those 12 dimensions that were inside of the proficiencies, the 12 dimensions, they include awareness, getting better at some of the things that you currently do. If you're striking for continuous improvement, that's a leadership characteristic. I've also learned that a lot of leaders that get promoted, they get promoted from within the organization. So you've taken your 20-year welder and you've just now made them your worst supervisor. And unfortunately, we don't give them the skills to be able to communicate, which is going back to our original question that Andreza asked about, where's the biggest problem? And I say that this 12-dimensional blueprint gets us to proficiencies, and then we can actually start participating in a better way. And so I think that the article itself was talking about just coming to the table with a different perspective and being prepared to deliver that perspective and having a discussion about it. But if you disrupt the way people are normally thinking, it'll take you down what we refer to as the disruptional path to proficiencies. I think it actually sets the organization up for an incredible success, especially if it has to deal with a mistake that you have to figure out. And it goes back to Dr. Amy Edmondson. She actually said that the best performing teams that are out there are the ones that are willing to admit that they've made mistakes, which full circle, humor and safety. If you want to get good at it, self-deprecating humor, just being able to admit that you've made a mistake is a great way to get engagement. Well, Amy's statement, Dr. Amy Edmondson's statement was that you'll get challenger and contributor safety if you allow them to speak up, and that means that they feel safe enough to do so. So that was the whole premise behind the article for 12 Dimensions. It's just a new way of looking. It's not anything like earth-shatteringly being invented at the moment. It's just that if you're a leader and you walk out of the room and everybody's got groupthink, you have to be, one, open to listen to another person's opinion, diversity of thought, and two, be prepared to come with a different opinion, but that should be okay for them to speak up about. So that was kind of the premise of the article.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andrezaaraújo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it. It's not always easy though. One thing that I'm really fascinated with, and it's been for a few years, is the topic about psychological safety. So Amy Edmondson's work. It's everywhere now. You know, everyone's talking about it. I was introduced to it in a company that I worked for back in 2020, actually, so 5 years ago, and they had it as this critical element of their culture and their leadership. And Professor Edmondson was like an alumni nearly of this company and so forth. So we were really deeply into it. But one of the most challenging things I found was actually the execution of it. So it's one thing to say that we need to have psychological safety, but it's another thing to be able to feel it oneself. And then also when there's lots of things going down, you know, in the organization, or lots of things going on, how easy is it for people to actually have that? Have you seen that or experienced that as well? Or are you seeing a change? Is the ship moving?
That's a good analogy, because in the Marine Corps, we were a department of the Navy, and sometimes we hated that terminology, but is the ship moving? As I'm looking at a book from David Marquet, or L. David Marquet, it's called Turn This Ship Around. Leadership characteristics is where it's at. So I've seen it. And a lot of the reasons why we wrote that article in the first place was to get people to just have a different vision. We always kind of get in a rut because we think that once we get promoted, now we're a manager, now we're making decisions, and all we end up doing is approving expense reports and filling out these quarterly business reviews. Actually, no. I mean, I know leadership is the terminology that we're referring to, but that's not vision. That's just doing a task. And if you want people to be influenced, or you want to empower your employees, or even going back to another 12-dimensional focus, perpetuation, if you're trying to get these things incorporated, you got to break ground from where you were. So yes, I've seen it. Are people stuck in a rut? Somewhat. But management and leadership are two different things. And I really work hard to try to identify that people are, you know, you might have a great manager. They're actually really good at managing things and people, but they're not necessarily a great leader. And I find that great leaders are full of vision. They got innovation. They're willing to talk about the tough talks. And I think that that's extremely important. So I've seen it. I just wish that we can get better at it continuously.
Tim, your book, The Core of Four, talks about tools to improve human performance. Can you share one of these tools with our audience here?
Oh, yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. My wife was invited to sing at Carnegie Hall. And here in the United States, there's an old cliche. If you get invited to sing at Carnegie Hall, the only way to get there is to practice, practice, practice. So when everybody asks, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Well, everybody responds, practice, practice, practice. Well, when she got invited, she was in the bathroom and that's the only place in our house, and I'm pointing this way because that's where it's at, but that's the only place in our house that's got enough acoustics so that way she can hear her voice, listen to the monitor, and practice. And she would do that over and over and over and over. And I've been giving her great kudos, but she's like, I'm not going to Carnegie Hall and failing. And so similarly, golfers, when they practice, they don't practice so that way they can just remove a mistake. They practice until they don't make a mistake. And I think what we can do better, and one of the terminologies that's in the book is practice perfectly. Because if you practice poorly, you'll end up performing the way you ended up practicing. And I think we can all do a better job, which actually, if you wanted to go back into being a trainer, I was always working and practicing and working and trying to make sure that I was doing a really good job. I didn't want to fail. So I was practicing until I didn't fail anymore. And I thought that that's what most people should be doing. Anyway, the book is actually spelling out a full acronym. Have you mapped out your day? MAPPED, and practice perfectly are the two P's. M is motivation. A is who are you accountable to? And the ED is exercise discipline. And I'll finish up on this. I got a chance to meet Samuel L. Jackson in the Marine Corps when I was in Desert Storm so long ago. And he actually said out loud, if you don't discipline yourself, someone else will. And that has stuck with me for years and years and years, because it's easy to deviate and break rules and do those kinds of things, but it's tougher to make the right decisions. And in the end, when you end up doing that or you exercise discipline, somebody else won't be coming along the way and saying you need to do it differently. And I think that's extremely important. But I appreciate you bringing that up. I really do. Thank you for asking about that. But practice perfectly, if I could talk about any of the four, would be the one I think is the one that stands out to me the most.
I agree in this concept. Well, it's like the athletes, the high performance athletes, practice.
Yeah. I wish I was one of those high performance athletes sitting in Maui right now, actually sipping on a Mai Tai. That would be great. But no, you're right.
I'm sure you encourage your students to do this as well, this practice perfectly as they're learning. One of the things I was really curious about when I was learning more about you and how you have been teaching at universities for years, and actually you and I have that in common. I used to be an academic, haven't been one for a long time. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about is, with all of these students that you're meeting, and I'm sure they're from different backgrounds, but especially the younger ones, the Gen Zs, what are you seeing or learning from them as they turn up to your classes and you get to know them?
I'm going to be fair, and I'll give you a negative and a positive. Right now, I'm fighting the battle of AI overuse, and so I'm looking for tools that I can have where a student submits a project or a paper or an assignment that I can detect the use of AI, because I'm feeling, this is anecdotal, I'm feeling that there's a voice that's being lost in the student, and everything's now becoming sterile and mechanical. So that's one thing that I wish the new generation would actually tackle was, let's see if I could do this thing without AI. So what we've done as teachers, professors, whatever you want to call us, we've actually started to embrace using AI. So we would give very specific rules on the education of the AI and then see what outcome would be, and then give them research requirements on the output of the AI outside of AI. So we've tried to embrace it. We try to do everything we could, but for the most part, if I can give you a positive, the communication nowadays has gotten better. The new generation, I think it's alpha now, has actually started to open up and talk as opposed to hide behind social media. And so what I find is that now there's more opportunity for office hours and conversations and people reaching out. And so I'll give kudos to that generation for being able or wanting to do that. And I think that since that's happening, it's like, now I want to have more talks. I want to have more conversations. And that's because that's what I do. It might come across that I'm an extrovert on this podcast, but when I'm teaching and training and I'm still kind of in my moment in a business, I'm still kind of an introvert in that way. But now that I've got more people reaching out and talking and having conversations, I think it's really, really cool. So I'm personally becoming more of an extrovert in the academic environment, and I think that's really, really cool. So to give kudos to that generation, thank you for reaching out, and thank you for the willingness to have more conversations. But do me a favor, maybe less AI if you could. That'd be great.
It sounds like they're curious and they're looking for connection.
Yeah, they are. I'll give you that much. And I think the connection is more important because that's more human related than artificial intelligence related. And that's extremely important to me.
Yeah. Well, that's the paradox, isn't it? On one hand, and you said this, their voice is being lost because of the use of Gen AI. Yet on the other hand, they're curious and they want to be connected. How do we even reconcile that paradox that they're going through? And especially as they start entering the workforce. Because one of the things, well, I think some Gen Zs have entered the workforce. But one thing I think about a lot with them is how can the current workforces support what they need, but also how do they contribute in a way that only they can by being a different generation, from others.
That's right. Yeah. That would be a project that you might want to tackle. How do we build this bridge? That would be an interesting concept to start looking at.
Yeah, I have 3 of them in my house. Well, not all the time because they're at university. And it's just something that I'm really interested in. I remember years ago in a company that I worked for, and they were teaching us about, I can't remember the right names for it, but it was about different generations and how the workforce has many generations. And it's not to say that one is better than the other, but it really was about understanding different ways of thinking about things and approaching things. And it made me think from a safety perspective as well, with all these different types of people in the workforce and different ways that people approach things and think about things. How do we communicate well with them? How do they communicate well with one another?
Yeah, if you, from a humor perspective, go back to those 4 things that'll help you from an engagement perspective: storytelling, memes, and improv, and self-deprecating humor. I think it's a great way to get people to engage. But outside of that, I don't know, something that's important to you. Star Wars. For me, I can have a conversation with someone because it might be important to them, but I've got to explore. Something like golf. I've done that with a couple of folks. I'm not stereotyping, but I see that they're wearing a polo that says whatever golf course. And then I'll ask them how they enjoyed that. It's an instant conversation starter. It builds a bridge. Find something that you might have in common with someone that might open up the door for a kind of a higher level connection. Don't spend too much time exploring because they might think you're like, what's going on? Why are you asking me so many questions? But yeah. But you know what? If you're trying to build a bridge or make a connection, there's got to be a way. And at least at the very beginning, if you maybe use one of those 4 things about storytelling, all the things I just said, or at least build a bridge through connection of finding an activity that people might like, that might open the door.
My documentary about the Mine Number 9 accident will premiere right here on YouTube. This tragedy was one of the events that inspired World Safety Day, a day to honor the memory of those who lost their lives at work. I'd love for you to join me for this premiere. Just head over to my channel at andrezaaraújo.official, subscribe and hit the bell so you will get a reminder when it goes live. See you there!
Do you ever wonder whether you're making the impact and have the influence that you're really, really looking for in your corporate career, perhaps if you're an entrepreneur or doing something else? Well, I offer one-on-one coaching services for purpose-driven leaders who are really looking to find some way of increasing their impact and their influence. So if this is something you're interested in, give me a call, send me a DM, and I'd love to talk to you about it.
If you like, I have a last question about how you view what the global safety trends do you believe will redefine the role of the EHS professionals in the next decade? So how you see about this?
I'm concerned about where we're going with AI now. I had a conversation with a company the other day, a technology company that wanted to incorporate some thoughts into a video camera system that's going to watch employees work. And they were going to develop artificial intelligence behind the video that's captured. And I said, what is the intent? Because if you bring this into the facility, you're going to have, and I use the term big brother, you're going to have employees complain that the big brother is staring at them, watching everything that they do. So you're not going to get a lot of productivity. And they said, well, we just need to know when they're not wearing their PPE. We need to know when they're not following directions. And I said, that's about 3% of the time. Wouldn't you want to know what they're doing the other 97% of the time? So in other words, if you got a video system that you're going to install, you should reward most of the people most of the time when they're actually doing what you're expecting them to do. Because the minute that you throw the 3% under the bus, that's a term that we use here in the United States where somebody makes a mistake. The minute that you throw them under the bus, they're never going to perform for you again because you just threw them under the bus. Or in other words, you made fun of them, you highlighted them. It actually goes back to that LinkedIn statement that you're actually pointing the finger at them. And so you'll lose continuity in the climate. But unfortunately, what it does is it seeks a culture of blame. And so people won't perform the way you want. And I'd suggest that from a trend perspective, that if you're going to use AI and tools like that, think about how you're going to use them positively and not kind of negatively throwing people under the bus. That's one thing. The second trend is that psychosocial risks has become kind of a conversation for the last couple of years. I don't see that going away for a while. I think that's going to stick around. DEI in the United States has kind of hit a wall at the moment. So that's a trend that's gone kind of differently in another direction. But one that I'm using and that I predict is that if you want to get better, you have to use an old adage, and that's plan, do, check, act from old Edwards Deming's models when he moved to Japan. And everybody remembers back in the day, because this is the huge paradigm shift in quality, is that Japan's quality got so much better overnight, and the United States quality got so much worse overnight. Well, if you want to get really, really good, you have to always want to improve. And I think that's what's most important. So if I could start a trend, maybe it's something we've always done. If you actually want to improve, why aren't you? What is it that you got to do? Go out there and get it. Continuous improvement will always bring customers to the door. I believe it. And so hopefully that's where we're going in the future.
Well, that feels like a good kick up the tail to all of us. Set some big goals. Keep improving. Amazing.
Yeah, you know what, Jim Collins in the book Good to Great says if you actually want to achieve the great things, you have to be willing to do the big, hairy, audacious goals. But if you don't have any goals set, you've got nothing to achieve. You're just going to do business as usual. So I'm a big believer in it, and hopefully everybody understands that continuous improvement is something that can be done. You just got to know what to do and set your goals towards it.
Amazing.
Thank you, team.
I feel like that's a beautiful closing to our conversation today. Set those big goals and continually improve towards getting there. Thank you, Tim. It's been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, I really, really appreciate the conversation. I am honored that you'd have me, and thanks for the invite.
We've reached the end of another episode of our podcast. I hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you enjoy this content, make sure to subscribe and follow the podcast on your favorite platform so you won't miss the upcoming episodes. Thank you so much for joining us, and see you in the next episode.